Bienvenidos, worldwide fans of the planet's hottest entertainment with an edge. Jaime En Fuego here, and I welcome you to my namesake program, Enfuegotainment. That is Rizzle Peeps, and I'm stoked that you're here for another Rapido Fuego review from the Chattanooga Film Festival, albeit the first time that they have been, unfortunately, due to circumstance, forced to do it strictly virtually. And so everything was through streaming, whether you were press or whether you had tickets that you would purchase. There was also some Q&As and the entire film slate of both features and shorts. And normally on a Saturday, I have been doing something called Shitter Day, and I can't necessarily say that this film was that particularly bad, but I have to at least preface that it was my least favorite that I watched of the dozen from the festival. And yes, I had thought about changing this to Shatter Day, like, you know, man, it's these shy as pants, man. But there's a song called Shatter Day from a punkcore band, post-hardcore, that I remember from years in the past. And so yes, it's staying as Shitter Day, everybody. But this is a film called Climate of the Hunter, and it's a very art house, not even so much horror, which is why it's not being reviewed over on my main gig at youtube.com/The Horror Show channel. This was, dare I say, despite how well it was shot at times, despite the fact that these actors were delivering almost borderline soliloquies, dare I say? I mean, like, legitimately very just sharp, vapid at times, and very intelligent dialogue. There was an essence of pretension to the proceedings here, as unfortunately happens occasionally with this sort of art house cinema, and it's definitely not horror. The whole mystery, which I think really in the description of this is kind of a spoiler, but since it was in the description for the festival, and I think on the IMDb as well, I have to at least mention that they say two women, sisters in this regard, basically are reconnecting with an old friend of theirs who may or may not be a vampire. If you throw that into just people's preconceptions when they're coming into this film, they're probably going to be expecting something different than what you actually find here. And that's not to say that this is a total crap film, because, man, we have a Patreon on the Horror Show, and I just watched a film today of the exploitation film variety that just reminds me that there is far worse creativity out there. And I know nobody sets out to make a bad film, but this was, as I said, my least favorite of the festival, because it was very pretentious, very dull, very drab in a lot of ways. And I felt like, you know, even though the performances, you could tell these were older, seasoned actors, and even though it's not necessarily spelled out, I got the vibe that this was a period piece based on some of the costuming and the lack of technology and stuff like that. It's at this isolated, you know, kind of cabin, remote house of sorts, where these two sisters meet up with this, you know, old friend of theirs who was just coming up from South America. He's recently committed his wife. He has a younger son that he is at odds with, who is a writer, just like the, you know, maybe vampire guy. And then you also have two sisters that, well, they get along. One has been in kind of seclusion up there at this, you know, cabin, remote house of sorts, and then the other one is in DC and is much more of the career-driven, whereas the other sister, who's more detached, she's smizzing constantly. She's like, oh, I just carve my things and sometimes I sell them. You can tell she's trying to segue to being off the grid. And so that's the dynamic of all of our major characters, you know. Father, maybe vampire, son, writer, as well as the father, and the contentiousness between the two of them over just the commitment of the mother and just kind of discarding her, and the charm that said father is kind of placing upon. He's definitely glamoring these two women. Oh, did I spoil something maybe? I'm not necessarily trying to, because really, you're not even sure at the end of the film necessarily if this guy was or not, and I would imagine that there are some who they think it's set in stone that he was or he wasn't. And I can give these theories without, like, really just, you know, stating stuff, because of the fact that the film is vague enough where it doesn't even at times state itself as much as you would want it to. But as far as the direction of the actors, and I'm assuming, especially with the way that the script was put together, the real thing here was that the delivery of dialogue was in just, dare I say, kind of a overly debonair and mildly snooty variety, and I could see that as being slightly off-putting for some people. It kind of was for me, but even if I wasn't, over the moon with the portrayals of the particular people on screen, it was masterfully directed in a lot of ways. I mean, cinematography was great, set design, some of the colors that were used in a few of the scenes, and yes, it is very snappy, witty dialogue. It's just, it almost felt like it was trying too hard at times, and I know this is a seasoned director that has lots of stuff under his proverbial IMDb belt, but it just, I don't know, anybody who has watched a lot of film, especially if you are somebody who has reviewed or been a film pundit or commentator or anything of that variety, there are times where actors come off as natural, and then there are times where they come off as it feels like they're acting, and the best sort of acting is where it doesn't feel like somebody is acting. And in this film, I felt like, especially our lead trio, the two sisters, and our maybe he isn't vampire, they all came off as feeling like they were acting to me, and especially after watching a dozen films over the course of the weekend and seeing some great stuff from South America where I didn't feel like acting was going on. This was one that just kind of stuck out like a sore thumb in that regard, hence it being thrown out on this particular Saturday. Once again, it's not a film that is without its merits. It has an interesting score, well shot, and I do enjoy the emergence of one of the sisters' daughter at one particular point. She, as well as the son of the is he or isn't he, who shows up halfway through. Both of them, they add an interesting influx of energy to the storytelling, because the rest of the time it is very slow build, boring. He's kind of charming, but I mean, one sister is really not desirable and kind of a bitch and mean to her other sister, and then the other one is just smizzing and talking with this guy who is just around the way, and her southern drawl comes out anytime she's talking to him. It is completely absent the rest of the time, and perhaps that was a deliberate choice. I'm not entirely sure, but nonetheless, Climate of the Hunter was my least favorite, unfortunately, of the festival. I have seen some people who praised it from other appearances at various festivals before all of the quarantining and craziness went down, but as somebody who adores slow burn vampire stuff, like Only Lovers Left Alive, Jarmusch, and I'm okay with this sort of slow form storytelling. I'm down, man. I'm totally down. But this one, just there was something about it that seemed disingenuous, at least from a performance standpoint, and that's not even so much to the actors. That's, once again, where I feel like they were directed to do some line delivery in a specific fashion that just felt maybe more so fit for the stage than the screen. It doesn't always translate. I don't know, because these are seasoned thespians in a lot of ways. I did not get the feeling for any inclination that we had amateurs on display here, but yeah, I'm gonna give this one 2 out of 5 Fuego Fireballs. This is a malo. This is this is bad, at least in my estimation. But if you were into it, hey, who am I to judge? I'm just expressing my own personal opinion, because as I always contend on this channel and on the horror show, art is subjective, and one man's trash is another man's treasure, and vice versa, so on and so forth. But anyway, I've been Jaime En Fuego. Y'all can find me on all social media sectors like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, as you see spelled below. On my personal channel here, that's where I like to do coverage of stuff that's more of the art house variety, more of the sci-fi, thriller, fantasy variety, but I do geek out and I do my Star Wars stuff from time to time, so you will find basically everything aside from what you would find on the horror show channel, which is what I mentioned earlier, where we do at least 1, sometimes 2 episodes a day. Lots of variety, everything under the scarific sun, as I like to say. But please, like, share, subscribe. Porfa y gracias. It means a major amount if you do. And that's going to be the end of it until more from the Chattanooga Film Festival. So until the Reel of Ka comes around once more, hasta luego, Cinemigos, and constant viewers and readers alike, because I do get a little bit of both of those here in this channel. I'm hopeful we shared this palaver sooner rather than later. Once again, and until then, remember, read that. Fuck. Going into the horror show stuff. It's It's one of the shitty things about being on 2 different channels and having 2 different
I
sign-offs.
wasn't even looking at you.
No, it wasn't you. It was me fucking up.
You can cut it out.
Yes, I know. I'm just waiting.
Okay.
And yeah, until that instance occurs, remember to stay indoors, stay safe, and watch more independent cinema.